So you might have said a variety of things. We're stressed by a lot, whether that is, college, studying for classes, exams, maybe it's earning income, having a job, being able to afford food and rent. Maybe it's traffic. Maybe it's having to drive around or get to work or, um, you know, driving in general. Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's the way that your partner makes you feel. Maybe it's like feeling like you're walking on glass all the time or just having arguments could be stressful. Maybe it's things like going to the dentist or going to the doctor or just needing to take care of your physical health. Or maybe it's, doing public speaking, getting out in front of a crowd. Maybe it's performing your job, the stress of people watching you, judging you, critiquing you, that social anxiety type feeling. Stress can be a lot of things, right? So by definition, I'm sure you all kind of feel and know what stress is, but stress is this unpleasant emotional state that results from a perception of danger. And we have perception in italics here for a reason, because it's not necessarily danger per se. It could be subjective and different across different people. It's just that your individual perceives that situation to be dangerous, and therefore it causes you stress. Just other vocab before we get deeper. When you see the term stressor, that just means it's the thing, the stimulus that actually causes you the stress. So there's the state, the emotional state, and the actual stimulus itself. So a couple things about stress that we should clarify. The first is that it is a subjective experience. So what stresses out one person is not necessarily going to stress out someone else. So for instance, let's say you go to a roller coaster theme park. I am not a roller coaster person. I'm afraid of heights. Those freak me out. So if I had to get on a roller coaster, that would cause me stress. But I bet some of you love roller coasters. Maybe you like that thrill. So for some of you, that might be exciting and bring you joy. So whereas I might perceive danger in the heights, in the fast pace of the car or whatever in that roller coaster, you don't perceive danger in that same way. So in that sense, think about these stressors as always being kind of subjective, so not necessarily stressful to everyone. Next, typically we think of stress as being a bad thing, right? But stress can actually be beneficial or harmful. So for instance, there's this good graph that shows how much stress you feel on the x-axis from low to high and your overall performance from low to high. So what this is showing is that as your stress increases and peaks, you actually get your optimal performance after a moderate amount of stress. Stress is good in moderation. Um, it's good because it helps motivate your performance. It increases your attention and your interest. It increases your chance of survival if you're paying attention to things, and ultimately your long-term health if you've got a little bit of stress in your system. But as I'm sure all know, as you're studying for that exam or whatever you're doing, if you get a little too much stress and you start to really increase your anxiety levels and meltdown, that makes your performance decline pretty rapidly again. So it could also be harmful for your health if it interferes with your performance and gets so serious enough that it might actually lead to something like a psychological disorder that we talked about earlier on in this unit. So something like anxiety disorder, for instance. So stress is not just bad. A little bit amount of stress is good for you. In addition to that, whether it's good or bad, it also can vary in its duration, how long it lasts. So stress can be either acute or chronic. So what these mean, acute stress is something that is a very small event. So I don't know, think about math, maybe like an acute angle, a little event, a little specific event. It has a defined beginning, middle, and end. You can see when it starts, you can see when it stops. And it can be something that is positive or negative. So if you look at this little diagram, these are things, for instance, like facing a new challenge. Maybe there's a competition. So it's a, 1 day long competition. It starts and it ends. Maybe you have to give a short hour-long presentation at work. You're lifting weights, running sprints, doing something short. Other common examples of acute stress Could be something positive like a wedding day. If you're really looking forward to and excited for getting married, if any of you guys have gotten married yourselves, you know that that is a stressful event as you're planning and leading up to, figuring out all the right things to make it the perfect day that you want it to be. That's an acute amount of stress though, because it's got a set point. It's a day. Once it's done, right? Um, it could also be something like getting a new job. So maybe going for an interview, maybe that's a stressful situation for you, or maybe your first day or week on the job as you're, learning the ropes. But as soon as you have the job, or as soon as you've done your training, you're done with the event, right? And then lastly, just in recent events, acute stress could be something like election day, or in this case, election week. But that idea that maybe we're all kind of stressed out, not knowing who's going to win a particular election, but ultimately you get your results, and that bout of voting stress ends, right? So you can contrast this kind of finite fixed durations of stress with stress that is chronic. Chronos means time, so something that lasts a long period of time. You see here things like drives to work that you have to make every single morning and don't really end. Um, Boss, work schedule, spouse, sleeping habits, friends, kind of those more long-term relationship type of things. By definition, it includes stressors. So the things that cause the stress occur either continuously or repeatedly. So all of the time or frequently, in a row. It also can be related to greater psych and physical symptoms. So you might start to actually, if you think of like chronic pain, or you might start to feel an actual change in your anxiety levels, or potentially your chest might tighten, you might, tense up, those kinds of actual physical changes. And some parallel examples of these. So whereas, wedding day might be an acute event of stress, maybe the overall marriage, maybe if it isn't working as perfectly as you were hoping and you're fighting all the time, or maybe this is stressful on your kids, this kind of lifelong relationship struggle could be a chronic stressor. Or for instance, you've gotten the new job, which is great, but maybe now you're working pretty indefinitely under a boss that is not someone you jive with. Maybe they're um, treating you poorly. Maybe they're really hard to man or work with. So this is kind of a long-term, doesn't really have an endpoint unless you were to quit, type of chronic stress. And then lastly, again, from recent events, whereas election day might be an acute stress, once you know the results, it's over. Something like, the years that person is in office might be more of a chronic stress for you, not knowing what's going to happen, what laws are going to be passed, what rules are going to go into effect, what's day-to-day going to look like. So it's kind of a more long-term stressful kind of event. So stress can be either short and small, or it can be long term, and it can be positive or negative. Something like a wedding day can be stressful, even though it's a positive event for you. In addition to that, though, the actual stressors themselves, the things that caused you the stress, um, can be really big things, but also really small things. So it may seem pretty obvious, things like getting an eviction notice on your front door and immediately finding out that you're homeless, you got to find somewhere else to go. Maybe you're low on income, that kind of thing. That one event is large enough that is a huge stressor in your life, just that event alone. But stressors can also be small. So these are stressors that aren't necessarily life-threatening, but still cause you to kind of have an off day, right? Have you ever had these days where maybe you oversleep your alarm, or you wake up late, so then you have to like rush to your work, to school, and then you get stuck in traffic, and then maybe you arrive there and you realize that you forgot to bring your lunch that you packed, you left it on the counter, so now you don't have a lunch to eat. So you're drinking coffee to try to stay awake, but then you spill it all over your shirt. And then lastly, maybe you're going out and you get to your car to drive home at the end of the day and you realize you don't know where your keys are, that you lost your keys somewhere in the office. So these are all individual things that by themselves aren't as stressful in magnitude as something like getting evicted. We refer to them more as hassles. I'm sure you've heard of this word before. These are relatively insignificant stressors, but in combination, they can contribute and work together and add up to a person's overall level of stress. So if you've had a day like this, I know I have, where by the end of the day, you're just like, I'm done, surrender, like this has been tough, because all those things in accumulation just weigh on you, right? So yeah, just keep in mind that stressors can be a big thing or a bunch of little hassles in a row that can, compound on each other.